Welcome to the Sound on Sound recording and mixing podcast channel. My name's Julian Rodgers. In this episode, we'll be discussing approaches to creating a hybrid studio, by which we mean studios which try to combine the best of software-based in-the-box approaches with external hardware. Joining us today, we have Gareth Young and Chevy One. Chevy is an award-winning producer and composer. He's built a 2-decade career across records, global brands and music technology. Operating a modern hybrid studio, he balances analog commitment with digital flexibility. Recent work includes IKEA's latest National Swedish campaign and product leadership at All Our Minds. Gareth Young is the owner of Cube Recording Studios, a residential studio in Cornwall, where he's worked with clients such as the XX, Tom Misch and Sam Ryder. Gareth has recently co-written and produced Tom Meehan's top 20 debut solo album, The Reckoning. And as a writer-producer, he's co-written and produced hits for the Sugar Babes, Appleton, Danny Minogue, Ronan Keating and All Saints, to name a few. Welcome both.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Excellent. So jumping straight in on the hybrid thing, Chevy, do you want to open us up? What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, if I need to describe it in one phrase, it will be hybrid is about choosing where to place friction. And I know might sound very...
philosophical?
Philosophical is the way. But to me, that is sort of like a staple of how build a what I call a hybrid setup. To me, is more of a better definition, because hybrid studio could be many things, but hybrid setup. And, when you can sort of like blend the analog for commitment and decisions, and digital is great for scale and precision, and be able to record large sessions. That's that to me, in a nutshell, is what is what hybrid really means now. Mixing on the box, printing through analog, all that kind of stuff.
Excellent. So I mean, correct me if I've got this wrong, but what I'm hearing is that for you, it's a workflow approach and not making things too easy all of the time. Would that be fair?
Not making well. Here's the thing. I do a lot of R&D with my equipment. Like, every single place needs to own the place in the studio. So I will, if I have a piece that I haven't used it for time, and it doesn't, sort of like go with the workflow that, of what my clients want, or when I need to do a project, then that normally tends to go.
Gareth, I mean, kind of same question. The difference I draw here is that I don't know Chevy's studio. I know yours. You've got lots and lots of a very nice outboard. Why is it there?
I think it's because I'm old. Let's start with that.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. I mean, I am very much from the days of tape machines going into early computers, and having a desk was always a thing. It was never not anywhere. So I've sort of continued that across the studios. I mean, we have consoles in all the studios. Some are more hybrid than the others, but for me, it's just capturing the best quality on the way in and making decisions on the way in is still something that I do, rather than just leave it till later or try and do it in the box afterwards. So for me, it's mainly a tracking situation. Is when I still use the analog equipment on the way in.
Hold that thought, because we'll definitely return there. Returning to something that you just said about consoles, you have 3 rooms at Cube.
Yeah. And
you have a console in... Do you still have a console in all of them?
Actually, no. The third room, we don't have a console currently. We've got an Apollo set up. So
Yeah. You did have... It was an AWS, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And while we're here, what's in each room? Because I'm sure people...
Okay, so the main room has a SSL Origin, 32 channel, which is great. Absolutely fabulous. And then the room I'm in now, which is our Studio B, has a Neve 8424, which is the one that doesn't have the mic input, so has a couple, and then mostly line. And then the third room is an Apollo-based system now, so there's no desk in there as such. It's just a monitor controller.
Excellent. Okay. Chevy, do you have a console?
Well, funny enough, I've just put it up for sale. My actual console. I mean, I've always have one of the Audient 32 channel Summing console, a bit of a hybrid system where I had 8 microphone inputs, 16 Summing inputs, but it has been very hard for me to let go of a console. because I like the tactile control, and it also works digitally. You know, you can use a protocol that it can work with Logic, which is my main DAW, and then, you know, everything is very seamless, great control room, talkback, all the good things that I actually like from a console. But time has changed, and now I'm seeing myself working into a different workflow, and I had to let it go. I actually took it away 2 weeks ago, and it's been very hard, I must say. It's actually been very hard, but I'm kind of like adapting quickly because times are evolving. I don't want to tap into that conversation, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. So, but yeah, I do agree with Gareth said. To me as well, it's all about printing, catching the moment, and you know, a method what it's like. If it sounds good now, don't think it like, oh, no, I'm going to turn off that compressor, or no, I don't want to have that boost on the top end because it sounds beautiful, because I might do it later on the computer. And I'm like, that's just the wrong approach.
Yeah.
Something sounds nice, just live with it, because it's music.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and this could be, again, open more doors, but I think we live in an era where it's like endless tweakability and a lot of wrong information going around, that it's just people often forget that it's still music, and music has never changed from like 100 years. But every time that I go on the internet, I see someone that actually think it has rediscovered something by tweaking the compressor like this, or by doing this, or by new method that's going to change. And I always keep thinking, if your music on itself ain't good, it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
And I always make emphasis on that. But that sounds a bit like, I don't know, it sounds like you will be of an old man by saying these things. But I'm like, well, but that's the reality. You know, I mean, you can't change that. You can't change, you know, music is a language, it's a form of art. And if we divert into many different things, then we sort of like moving away from the main point, which is like, does it sound good in the first place?
A point that has to be made at some time, because yes, I think everyone's going to agree that if you've got a killer recording with fantastic take, then why would you do anything to it later? Yes, absolutely. That's interesting. Chevy, is your studio public facing in terms of kind of, do you receive clients there, or is it just your workspace?
Yeah,
you do?
Yeah. I mean,
okay, we should return to this. Gareth, I've spoken to you about this before, and You think that a proper recording studio experience for a client kind of ought to involve having a big console in the room? Is that paraphrasing you too much?
Remember, I've been here for 20 odd years, and, you know, that was definitely a thing. I think, you know, as we move forward, the idea of a big room is less and less on TikTok or on Instagram anymore, and it's more computer based, you know, and so I don't know if it is as important as it used to be for getting clients through the door, but I do think that for my client base, we need to offer what they can't get at home, and that's always been the thing. So yeah, I think for us, you know, the SSL badge and the Neve badge is still a door opener and gets people to look at our studio.
There is a benefit beyond purely having the console available to you for the workflow.
There's a commercial element in terms of you know, as I say, offering people what they haven't got at home and what they can't do on, you know, an Apollo or whatever.
Which is a lot, it has to be said, but yeah, absolutely. Which brings us to the subject of control surfaces. Do you both own and use control surfaces? If so, what and how? I think I know some of the answers to this, but please, Gareth.
So the Neve 8424 that I have does have the automation on it. I did pay extra for that to get it, and I absolutely love it, to be fair. Do I use it enough? Probably not, but when I do use it, I always enjoy using it. I've also got a SSL UF8 somewhere here, but I don't know where that is. That one seems to have just been put in a box somewhere, but I do have one somewhere.
Well, they're only small, aren't they?
Not for any other reason apart from the fact that the Ross, my main engineer, who is in the SSL room most of the time, he just does it all on a mouse, because that's, you know, that's his thing. So it just wasn't getting used, so we moved it out and put a couple of compressors in there instead. So but yeah, the 8424 I like it because it feels really solid in terms of the fader movements. It doesn't feel flimsy, it doesn't feel, you know, so it does actually feel like you're, you know, more of a big console automation feeling, you know, which so yes, I do use it. Again, Probably not enough, but I do use it because the mouse is still probably the quickest way to get to what you need to do.
Oh, okay. Because this is kind of breaking with the answer that I hear more often than not, which is about the benefit of at least having physical faders available to you during a mix. Chevy, where do you stand on the faders versus mouse relative merits debate?
So I've took this subject to very, very, very far because I've been looking for a very stable solution for many years because I agree with Gareth. The mouse on the keyboard is just and it's just so fast. It's so fast that can actually solve any problems that you want. Now, I call this issue, for example, let's say I love to have a console, but my projects can be 180 to 200 tracks. I don't think that is physically possible with a console. It's just simply it's not. Sound design, music production, modern production, composition, it's just the amount of channels and different nuances there need to be with different sounds, and then duplicating a track and then having different plugins, or you want to have that effect and you want to reverse it. That sort of like it start to create channels. And as I say, a normal production after recording all vocals and backings and all the bells and whistles can, as I say, up to 200 tracks. If I need to manage that, even if it's on groups on an analog console, for me it's just not possible. I mean don't get me wrong, I've tried. So besides the mouse on the keyboard, I found one solution that it sort of like gives me again the best of both worlds. And I'm not trying to be any sort of like, oh, he said this brand or the other brand, but I'm a huge fan of Console One. I've got one. And I use it every single day because I wanted something that it could be one single software, one single plugin where I can just control it without even looking at it. So it's a basic channel SSL channel strip, and then you have your EQ, your compressor, and it also controls logic, volume, and panning faders, and it's always in front of me. And that for me has been the best solution. So I don't have to have faders. But if I want to control something, either volume, distortion, it's right in front of me, and it's always, one button, that's one thing. And that has, for me, really changed my perspective so much that I end up getting rid of my desk.
Yes, Console One, great product and really well spoken of. The thing that I certainly have heard people enjoy most about it is its dedicated nature of doing one thing really, really well rather than trying to do everything possibly less well. Would you agree with that, Chevy?
Oh, no, totally. I mean, think about something. Have you not ever, I don't know, maybe years ago when, when we used to move from analog to digital, I've heard a lot of people be like, oh, I would love to have one channel strip that can control everything on my DAW. So I can just select channel 25 and then I can have my EQ, my sense. If I had £1 every single time I talked to a producer that told me that, this is about, 15 or more years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, I was like, yeah. And now someone finally goes and does it pretty well. And not only that, you're not limited. And again, I'm not, probably I'm big enough soft to you, but, the fact that you can actually, swap the plugins. Like you simply go like, oh no, but the SSL is not my kind of plugin. No problem. Fat filter, no problem. Plugin Alliance, it's an open platform.
Well, and it's true. It has expanded out, but to begin with, it was like very, very focused, and it was. I think it was only SSL in the first iteration, but
correct.
But yes, doing one thing very well, and there are other examples I could talk about, but yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. However, what I want to do is, we're talking about having equipment that does one thing very well.
Yes.
And this kind of could link quite neatly to outboard, just because over and over again we're talking about specific pieces of outboard that do one thing extremely well, very often on very similar material. It's like I have this compressor because I really like it on bass. I have this compressor because I really like it on, insert name of source here. Gareth, you've got a lot of outboard.
Too much.
Perusing your racks when I've been at your studio, and but Does that sound familiar to you of just kind of like, okay, I have this particular kind of instrument. Here's what I would try first if I want to get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all got
way.
our go-to channels and compressors for certain things. I mean, I have a lot of the, should we say, standard stuff, the LA2As and the 1176s, but then also I've got some BAE stuff, and I've got a Fairchild finally, which is lovely. Or Palm Child, I should say.
We'll circle back to that, but yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of different mic pre's, a lot of different variants on that. I mean, I think that is something that I got a bit carried away with when I was, just too many late nights looking at eBay and just, buying stuff and seeing what it was like. But, there's been a couple of where...
But any particular finds that, because I mean, we can go to kind of like, yes, 1073s are great on. I mean, we know a lot of the usual candidates, but anything that perhaps people haven't heard of.
Well, there's a company called Peach Audio. I don't know if you've come across them, and they do.
I think I was around when you bought that. But
that thing. I mean, that was a. To be honest with you, SX Pro just sent it to me randomly when they, and it just arrived, and I was like, well, and they were very clever because they knew what was going to happen, and so I just used it for a couple of days, and I just thought, this is great.
Describe what it is, because not everyone.
I mean, it's a 2-channel mic pre, but it's super vibey in its sound. I mean, it's just got a lot of extra controls on it where you can saturate things a little bit, and you can.
And it's a tube thing with VUs, and that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of mauvey colour, I seem to remember.
That's it. Yeah. But
and
I think they're Australian.
What have you found that's particularly?
It's really good on drums, overheads, and also I use it a lot on acoustic guitars. And I mean, it's a good workhorse generally, but it just it's very fast. It's sort of brings things to the foreground.
Oh, okay, that's not a word you usually associate with valve gear.
Exactly, which is why I think it stayed in the rack and spinner ever since.
Interesting. And you've also got some undertone audio pre's, which I've always thought were rather good.
Amazing.
Anything specific to say about those?
They're always on drums. Always on drums. Okay. Yeah, always. There's those. I'm just trying to think what's in my rack now because I forget some of the times.
Well, that's okay. I mean, we could while you're thinking about that, we go to Chevy. I mean, similarly, do you concur with any of what Gareth was saying? Any thoughts on where to use your available analog gear and kind of and how?
Well, I mean, it's great that you asked me because I had a sort of like a reconnection with a person that sadly died in 2025, which is Ted Fletcher.
Okay.
And I've been digging into it, and I've rediscovered one of his latest creations, which is the TF Pro Studio Channel P1, and which is very, very hard to find. I need to say this man was a legend. Ted Fletcher was the actually guy who built all the analog consoles for the BBC. And obviously, he knew a thing or two about analog signal, and especially about optical compressors. So if you ever come across to one of the Ted Fletcher products, especially one of the latest ones, which is he kind of like separated from the old Joy Mic, and then he sort of like made a bit of a mastering sort of like line, then you can find that he's got an optical compressor with 5 different types of variable knee, which I don't have to say more, but that's kind of like having 5 different types of optocompressors of how to react to material. So you end up testing stuff, and then you'll be like, I think this is incredible for vocals and some acoustic guitars, and then you try all the different things. I mean, I do have as well, not as much as Gareth, because we all been at Gareth, and then Gareth is like impressive. But as I say, every single piece in my studio, which if anyone wants to know, I can go through, but maybe this is for another time. I do like the analog, and I especially like to find the tools that work with with certain material. I mean, we all know that an 1176 could be used on many different things. We also know that different compressors might benefit different type of sources, but again, I tend to test those myself and make my own decisions. I mean, I like what the overall public might sense about, you should always use this, But then it's the always classic, what I call my R&D sessions, where I test things on things people might not think of, and then you get some eureka moments.
This is something that I certainly think is a potential pitfall because of the wealth of information we have available online, to assimilate other people's opinions without ever trying them. And that's what you're saying, isn't it? Of like, yes, you don't. It's not exactly news that 1176s are great on drums, for example. But if you really experiment, they're pretty good on most things.
Yeah, they're pretty good on most of it. But I keep saying this. I always try to catch people with things, especially when people sort of like talk the usual, what I call the overall knowledge that you can find on the internet. I mean, the purpose why the 1176 units were made were to prevent the signal to clip into tape machines. Now, nowadays, I don't see people sort of like recreate. Only few producers I've seen to recreate that on the software world. So it's kind of like, okay, if we really want to know what is the actual purpose, what was the purpose of a legendary hardware made for, the best thing is just go back, research, and then be like, well, this hardware machine was built for purpose. And this is one of the things that doesn't happen on software, because software is like the Matrix. Anything could be turned into whatever you want. A river can turn into a chorus, or it can turn into this. Okay, I understand, software sometimes trying to solve problems. But back in the day, hardware was built to actually solve an actual problem. They weren't thinking about other things. This happened with the Pultec. This happened with, with 1176. I mean, it happened with many different machines that we had. And I don't even want to go into limit mode from the LA to A, because people are looking at me like, are you crazy? You know what I mean? But all these sort of things, for me, is very important that people really, truly educate themselves, do a bit of reading, understand why the tools that we have around ourselves exist in a studio. And someone like Gareth, is the perfect example. You ask him, I need to record this, and you go, blah, you need to use this. Why? Because
don't include me.
Yeah, I mean, you being on that area where it's like, when you have a studio, then it was certain pieces, for whatever reason, for economical, or simply because certain things were invented. And I do believe that the good things that the hardware does is like it limits yourself. And when you limit yourself, creativity expands, which it doesn't happen with the digital one.
Well
anyway,
said.
Sorry.
That's true.
Yeah, well said indeed. Something that, I mean, taking what you said possibly a little further, is that hardware is an investment in a way that software isn't, and because of that, you're very motivated to try to get as much out of it as you can. I know that I have been.
Sure.
And for example, I haven't got a great deal of really good hardware, but one thing I have got is a BAE 1073, like a dual channel one.
Nice.
And I've used that, getting everything I can out of it, because the thing was expensive. I want to use it. Good examples are, I mean, obviously you can attenuate it and drive the transformers really hard and use it as a saturation box, which is, doesn't take a lot of figuring out. Something else that I've used it for is because of the inductor high pass filters, which you can set differently on either channel. You can offset them out of the way, down low where they're not really doing anything, but you can get really interesting stereo spread things because of the different phase response on each channel. For example, I could do that in software so easily, but it feels more valuable if you're doing it in hardware. It's Gareth, we should bring you in on this, because somewhere where we see a lot of activity with outboards and hybrid approaches is either on the way in or the way out. So how and where do you use your hardware on playback?
In a mix situation? Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things where I'd love to use it a lot more than I do. I have currently got, as I said, this Fairchild that I've got. I've currently got that locked against as an insert on my master bus in this room. But everything else, it's just the whole, the recall and trying to work on 15 projects at once and coming back to, it's, I mean, I don't know how you find it, Chevy, but I find one of the downsides of Logic is if you keep going back into the same mix page, things change. Whatever happens, it doesn't. For me, I don't like that element of recall as a maximum. In terms so putting an analog in the way as well, it's just going to make the job take longer. So most of the time, I don't use much in the mix stage. When I do, I really enjoy it, and it's the thing that I do use the summing on the Neve a lot, because that is much easier to control and to recall. But in terms of actual strapping compressors across things, I might do it now and again, or but it's not something that I do. Software, unfortunately or fortunately, wins in that sense, because like I saw, I've got loads of presets I've made up on my own channels and my own things that I recall and then work from there generally.
Okay, there's a word beginning with R that's looming around, which we should get to in a minute. But before we do, Chevy, in terms of mix processing, group processing, anything on buses, is there much going on in the analog domain for you?
Oh yeah, everything in my line of work is on the master output. So as I say, I will track with hardware and capture what I want with the hardware in. That is, for me, is a must. I don't play that game anymore. So as Gareth said, if it sounds good, then you record it with your EQ, compressors, all that stuff. Fantastic. Let's do that. And but then on the way out, when I reach to a level of the project where everyone is happy with the compositions, and I want to take this to my sort of like field, which could be a composition, the creative team goes like, okay, this has been approved. And it's like, okay, it's time now to give the high-res version, the version that everyone goes like, oh my God, what have you done with this? So that's the time in my master bus, I process through I don't know. Can I get into details? Well, I'll do it easily.
No, think of the audience. I'm sure someone listening is going to want to know what you're using.
So my thing is always two type of EQ, two type of compressor, and a summing, and then a mastery limiter. So I will go a Elysia X filter, and I've got then a IGS rubber band, which is kind of like passive EQ. So I will do the adjustments with the X filter, which is then I would then color the signal with the IGS, and then to give a different color. So one is sort of like to control what's coming out of the master output. The other one is to color the master output. Then I'll have a very clean compressor like the Expressor from Elysia as well. And then is when it goes to the either a classic SSL, X Logic SSL, the G Bus, the classic one, nothing new, transformer-less, but it's got a sound. And then it goes to a couple of transformers. I'm a big fan of Cranbourne Audio. The summing mixer they got on the added equipment is incredibly good. It's incredibly modern compared to my Odeon desk. The low end is very... you got to be careful sometimes. Like I've tried in acoustic material, and then suddenly the mid-range is too forward, and people go like, no, I don't like that. But for modern music, it's incredibly well. Like suddenly the kick drum, the bass is right on your face, very well controlled. And then I go through a Betamaker mastery limiter.
Oh, right. Okay. So this is... Is that things that you're bringing in and out, not necessarily using all of that?
No. They always all go in that sort of like chain.
And I'm seeing clean followed by color kind of combination.
Yes, that seems to be. Although I have seen some projects where I just press a bypass and it goes like, oh, it sounds better without it. I'm like easy with that, but I must say that since I got this unit, it's been a learning curve. And it's been a learning curve because, an 1176 and an octacompressor recording stuff is very easy to tweak. It's just you just tweak, and it's just only one. It's only one sound. It's either bass, a guitar, vocal. But when you have an entire mix going through, then how you approach a compressor to an EQ, it's been a very, very enjoyable learning curve. And so far, when I deliver the mixes, people was like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "Well, this is what I want. This is what for me what it works." But again, I don't. My line of work is different than Gareth. Gareth needs to record full bands. I don't do full bands, but we can tap into the type of sort of like clients that we have. But that's a different thing. So I understand where Gareth is coming from with his way of doing. I mean, we both know how busy his studio is. Imagine having to change.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, I mean, we might as well go there just because, I mean, I referred earlier to kind of like, getting sounds right on the way in, maybe getting them right on the way out again is achievable using a hybrid approach, but things get much more difficult. The downsides get multiplied, shall we put it that way? Are either of you ever using your analog gear as inserts on tracks in projects?
On Pro Tools or Logic, is that what you mean?
Yeah. In
Yeah, I mean, I do that. I definitely do that.
Oh,
I don't do
okay.
it as much as I should do it. Again, I think that in the future, I think that when it's just me sat in my new, garden studio, I think I probably would have a much more setup where things were patched and much more accessible. But again, because we are a commercial studio and we're having to use things, the patch bay has to be accessible. I can't have stuff hardwired into certain inserts on interfaces and things like that. I think for me that's probably one of the reasons why I don't use it as much as I probably would do.
So
Does that make sense?
this is a good point, actually. We haven't discussed that. So your gear, is that all patched up to a patch bay?
Everything in all the studios is just
You're
on a
doing it
conventional
there.
patch bay. Yeah, so which makes it and the rooms are patched together as well, so you can record.
And given the work you do, that does make sense. So in your studio, Chevy, patch bay, are you manual patching?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got patch bays, and well, I mean, the funny thing is, like, when I sort of like moved from London to Hertfordshire to build this new studio where I am, I had a different sort of like idea of what the clientele was going to be, and then over the 2 years, I realized, like, okay, well, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I've been adapting, but not in a bad way. So I've got pretty much everything that you need in here to sort of like looms, and I got patch bays, and everything is sort of like patchable because it's the right way. I mean, again, I'm a bit old school into all this. If you have analog equipment, the best way to patch it and mix it together is to have a patch bay. To me, like, not having a patch bay is like, I don't know.
Although, I suppose the point I'm getting to is that, yes, having a way of patching is important if you need flexibility, but you're not just limited to the choice of old school manual patch fields these days.
No,
for example, I know people who use Dante as a huge digital patch bay, but there are digital, software recallable patch bay solutions for people who want to go there as well. But neither of you have
and I'd like to
investigated
go there, to be fair, but I think I will end up there.
Right. Okay.
In the future,
It might
for sure.
solve some of the issues. Right. So we should bring things in. We've kept a hard division so far between there is software and there is hardware, but things get a little bit muddled in the middle. For example, recallable hardware. Examples, I don't know, like Wes Audio, your Better Maker. That's that kind of gear, isn't it?
Fully recallable. I mean, it's still the version 1. It's not the sort of like latest version 2, but it's kind of like, it's fully recallable. You open the plugin, and it's just so easy to recall and making presets, and it's kind of like a beast. Like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I never thought that a master limiter, it was going to be this good.
Did you buy it for that feature?
Yes. It's kind of like the last thing on the whole chain for a reason, because I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I need to finish a mix for a client, and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, I need to tweak this, I need to tweak that, I need to tweak that, and I'm not gonna lie, put it through, add a bit of some of like the different type of distortions that it had, and it sort of like, it makes everything, the transient response of the track, everything gets together. And then I'm like, okay, it's just done quicker than I thought that was going to be.
I
So
see, yeah.
you invest in money in something that is going to get your turnover faster, which is one of the things I forgot to sort of like mention earlier, but that said Gareth, when he said about he thinks about, it would be amazing have my room and then, tweak all these things and be able to insert the stuff. But the reality is that we haven't talking here, is the client willing to pay for that? For that extra time, because that is one of the things. I'm more than happy if someone comes to me and goes like, "Hey Chevy, for the drum bass, I want you to dial in the Better Maker, or for that thing, can you bring the SSL?" I'll happily do that. I'll definitely happily do that. But you can't do that when someone goes like, "I need to get the 2 tracks done by tomorrow."
Yeah, agreed. Any recallable hardware at Cube, Gareth?
No, unfortunately not. We're still old school. I mean, apart from the desk, obviously.
There's the other approach, which is, for example, the DSP APB, which has got, very much a software forward but still analog process.
Amazing stuff. That's amazing stuff.
Okay, have you tried one, Chevy?
No, I've tried it in NAMM and different sort of like trade shows, but I haven't actually sort of like had one of them myself. I was very excited when they actually released a proper brick wall limiter, which I was very willing to sort of like have a listen. Obviously the price tag is there, but I think the public is not there yet. It's one of these amazing products where the plugins are incredible. They come up with a groundbreaking product, and with this, probably a lot of people are going to hate me, but we living in an era where the software is sort of like not moving forward as much, and that's not a bad thing. All I'm saying is like it keeps coming with the same thing over and over with extra features, like, oh, that is the SSL EQ, but it's an intelligent EQ, and I'm like, well, but it's still an SSL EQ, and all these kind of things where the guys of MCDSP, they went really forward, and I think it's about the public to actually catch up how the good product they have. I mean, it's
it is a great product. I haven't met anyone who's used one much who doesn't love it, so that probably says something. So yeah, we've kind of filled in the middle ground, if you like, between strictly analog and strictly software. Something I mean, Gareth, this is probably one for you, because you said that you have all this hardware, but it's been kind of squeezed out by Recall. Which we still haven't confronted head on, although I've referred to it in passing a few times. Recall is the thing, would you agree, that's really pressured these analog workflows out of studios and workflows?
I mean, today, this morning, we've had 3 mix amend requests, for different projects come in on email already today, and for things that we've done a week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, whatever. So to try and recall and do those without being able to do it in the box would be, they just, again, it comes back to what Chevy said. The clients just aren't going to, if you just said, yeah, that's great, it's going to take 6 hours or, whatever it is, they're just not going to, they're just going to be, no. So we have to
leaving a piece of paper on top of the console saying "mix in progress, do not touch." Isn't really viable.
And also
for you
trying to
these
find
days.
a compressor setting from 6 months ago is just not going to. It's just not a reality. I think the recallable stuff is definitely the way forward for that. And I've not had too much experience with it, but I can, from what I've seen again at NARM with it's probably the way forward. But in terms of what we do here, the clients are booking in, we get album projects, but we get a lot of 2-day, 3-day sort of sessions. And, everyone wants to tweak a mix a week after they've had it. Every single person. Nobody, if you get it right on the first, then, that's an exception rather than a rule.
You must have an awful lot of emails that start, "Can you just?"
Yeah. And can you not charge me for that? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, yeah. So we have a very strict one amend policy, and then after that,
well, that is a good thing.
And you'd be surprised how many people would love that first amend and don't want any more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I want to bring it back to something that you said earlier, Gareth, which is that you've got all of this outboard, but it's been squeezed out by just the reality of kind of the work that you're doing. So have you got any examples of pieces of hardware that you have the hardware, but you're using a software version because of the convenience and workflow, like a one-to-one kind of thing? Do you have an SSL bus compressor, but you're using a software SSL bus compressor, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, again, we have a SSL bus compressor on the Origin that doesn't get used that much, if I'm honest. Again, it gets used when we're tracking, if you want to just get a bit of funk in the room and like make everyone feel a bit better. And I've got some, I've got, I don't know, 4 1176s and a couple of LA2As, but I haven't got 10, which is what we end up using in a mix. So for that reason, there is that. And I do have bits of gear that I often look at that I haven't switched on for 2 years, but I'm not getting rid of it because it's it's things that I do love, and when I do switch it on again, I will love it. It's one of those. But
is there a case? I mean, having stuff up to a certain point, I mean, it can get counterproductive. But if you've got room for it and and it's not doing any harm being where it is, then it's you might as well sit on it. We haven't really mentioned instruments, and of course, I mean, particularly with virtual instruments, are you still using hardware instruments when viable software alternatives exist and have the advantages of Recall and other things as well?
In 2001, Jules, I had 18 synths, and currently I have 1 Hammond.
Yeah.
I've got a Juno 106 as well. So I mean, that sort of answers your question.
Okay.
But again, one of my regrets is getting rid of those keyboards, just because I think that the real deal is definitely still the real deal.
And there it is. very wise friend of mine said to me, if you don't need stuff, get rid of it, but keep instruments. And I think there's something to be said for that. What about you, Chevy? What about instruments?
Yeah, I do have some regrets of things I've sold in the past, and I actually, I always like to bring another thing to the table, but let's be honest, with some of the hardware equipment, very specific pieces, they actually, if you think of money, they're investment. Like some pieces, like I want to keep the ones that will go high in price over the years. I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's not the same thing to be like, oh, I'll buy something that costs £900 now, and then it's gonna go down by 200 in a couple of years. That, oh look, I've got this amazing piece of this instrument, that I know over the period of time will go out in value. Or that's one thing, right? In terms of money and all that. But the other one is I had a lot of keyboards, and I've sold a lot of keyboards, and I still have some now. Some of them that I will never ever sell.
Yeah.
I'm a sampler guy, so I still have a IKEA S1000.
Okay.
Yeah, fully love it and all retrofitted with all that kind of stuff.
When did you last switch it on though?
Oh, long time ago. But you know what? When you come to the studio, it looks great.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that.
And I still have the IKEA MPC 2000 XL, which I still have here, and that get quite used, especially when someone wants a bit of a 90s flavor. And I'm a big fan of monophonic analog synths as well, so I still have some pieces. But here's the thing, I'm getting rid of the ones that I lose in value, and I'm gonna invest on the ones that actually are good value.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I would say that if you do have the money and you like instruments, definitely buy instrument because it holds its value. Like, put it this way, and analog economics a little bit, but if you're gonna have £1,000 in the bank and it's gonna devalue over the year of whatever 2 years, rather buy £1,000 on an instrument that's going to make you some percentage later down the way. So
you're talking to the guy who sold a Juno 106 for £250 in 2004. So
it happens. It happens.
Yeah. But I mean, we've all had that. Well, certainly I've had that painful experience of something that I bought new, which then many years later, but it's happened to me relatively recently, gets released in plug-in form, and I think, there's a lesson there. There's a lesson there. I haven't got
not
that
the
anymore.
same. It's.
Oh no! I just mean the fact that isn't there some kind of status that goes with this piece of hardware? There's a plug-in of it now, which means that
it means it's good or bad, or it doesn't mean it's good.
Or notorious or something. But yeah. So I mean, you went there with the economics thing, which was something I wanted to say. I mean, certainly, the value proposition has to be referred to. Between when we're talking two sides of hybrid workflow, software versus hardware. I mean, who Gareth, you got anything to add to what Chevy said?
In terms of the economics?
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, you're sitting on a lot of hardware, and
a lot of money.
And
I mean, for me, I think I always have bought clever on the gear that I've got. I've always got a deal along the way, and so my investment into gear, with some exceptions, but most of the the older sort of stuff I've got is, I didn't buy it new, I bought it second hand, and it's probably worth what I paid for it, if not more now. So I think that you can still do that with the hardware for sure. I mean Chevy's right, with certain instruments you can lose your right foot, or you can make a load of money if you want to do that, but I don't think that anything in my situation, apart from the stuff you buy brand new, like anything, it devalues or it doesn't. But
yeah, if you bought a Synclavier new
it's going to be painful. But I mean, the only thing I tend to buy new is consoles, and or speakers. I'm just looking around the room, thinking, what have I bought new? And it's generally been speakers or consoles or interfaces, because you need the
so
the
things
latest.
that either have to be current because of the
and Macs,
technology
obviously.
demands, or I mean, I'd argue that speakers have got better with time, whereas that isn't the case for a lot of hardware. But
yeah.
Excellent. It feels like we're kind of coming to the end of the discussion. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes page for this episode, where you'll find further information along with web links and details of all the other episodes. Oh, and just before you go, let me point you to the soundonsound.com/podcasts page, where you can explore what's playing on our other channels. This has been a Julian Rodgers production for Sound on Sound magazine.